Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I am excited to have you listen to another interview with some people who are sharing their lived experience with anxiety and OCD. I really enjoyed just starting to talk to people and bring to you their journeys, especially talking to people who can reflect back on their childhood. And so I am really excited to have this conversation with two sisters, Emily and Lindsay, who both had anxiety and OCD. Actually, they both thought they had anxiety, and both of them had different themes of OCD. And luckily, a very savvy parent who was able to catch it and identify it, and they were able to connect eventually to therapeutic services that were able to help them. But what I also love about their story is that they have taken their experience and they have propelled it forward and have created something to help other people. And so they created a shop back during COVID 2020 called Presently Bracelets, and their bracelets are beautiful, and they have these very therapeutic expressions on them that I think can really be an anchor and grounding. And so stay tuned. We're going to dive into their story and some of their themes and struggles. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S., and you can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I will leave a link in the show notes. And when you hear Emily and Lindsay's story, it's like, thank goodness we have places like NoCD that are really educating the world in their campaigns to help people understand what OCD is so that this doesn't happen to kids, that things get missed or undiagnosed, because OCD is so good at morphing and shifting. And when you understand the core fear that's driving all of that, then you really can kind of like hit OCD at its core, like what I like to call the epicenter. And a lot of times parents don't even know where to start with that. What is their child's core fear? Because it can seem like your child has all these different themes and different subtypes of OCD, or different subtypes of anxiety, or some different subtypes of anxiety and OCD. If you look at my daughter, it's like, oh, she's got emetophobia, the fear of throw up, and she's got social anxiety. She's got sensory motor OCD. When you look at all those, she actually just has one core fear that ripples and dominates all three of those themes. And to help you with that, I actually am doing a workshop coming out in December. It'll actually be on December 9th. It's my first live workshop on Zoom. I've never done that before, to help parents identify the core fear or fears that is fuel lining their child's anxiety or OCD. And I'll talk briefly also about why it's important and how you can use those core fears to really help your child catapult and move them forward. And sometimes a therapist may miss these, and you might need to educate the therapist or have this knowledge to really propel therapy forward. So you can sign up for this. It's only $10. I just want it to be incredibly affordable, especially during the holiday season, so that you can jump on this call, get this information, or if you can't make it live, register for it and you'll get the replay. You'll only get the replay if you register. You can register at natashadaniels.com/workshop. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but it's natashadaniels.com/workshop. And I think you'll find it really valuable to learn the tools to find your child's core fear. And then you'll never be kind of playing whack-a-mole and thinking that you're just stomping out all these ants everywhere, when really it's just one queen bee. Or, well, that did not work, that analogy. It's just one queen ant. There you go. And once we get the queen, then the whole anthill starts to crumble. And that's really the ultimate goal. Back to what we're going to be talking about today. I'm looking forward to having you listen to Emily and Lindsay's story. Check out their website at presentlybracelets.com. That's presently, like presently, L-Y. I will leave a link in the show notes. PRESENTLY bracelets.com, just in case it's confusing. But I think you're going to really enjoy hearing them and checking out their stuff. All right, well, without further ado, here's my interview. Well, I want to welcome Emily and Lindsay to my show. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Yeah, I feel like my audience lately has really enjoyed hearing people's personal stories. I haven't done that. This is like a new thing. I haven't done a lot of that. A lot of it's just me talking in my episodes, but a lot of people have reached out who have incredible stories about their OCD and wanting to share that with other people, which I think is really brave. And I think it helps parents and kids and teens who listen to this know they're not alone on a deeper level. So I'm excited to hear your story and kind of like where it took you into, we'll get to that part in a minute. But I wonder if we could jump in and just start with, you guys are sisters. We can start with where your OCD journey began.
So I'm going to say I'm Emily, the younger sister. So I think it makes sense to start with Lindsay's story since hers happened chronologically before mine.
Okay.
So I'm Lindsay. I am 34 years old, 5 years older than Emily. And my OCD journey had started when I was about, I'd say probably when I was maybe in even elementary school, where it was like, you're very, I don't want to say basic because nothing about it is basic, but it was when the preliminary stages of OCD kind of evolved of like switching on switching on and off the light switch, and asking my parents to repeat stuff, lining things up away because I thought that if I didn't do that, something bad would happen. And that kind of like remained kind of steadfast until I was about in high school, when my OCD transformed into something I didn't even know was OCD at the time. It turned into like existential OCD. And the part that like why we're here today and like why I like sharing my story is because I had no idea that it was OCD. I thought I was going crazy, or I thought that like I was stuck in another alternate universe, or I was dead, or wasn't sure if I was alive. So it kind of started at that point, and that's when it took a turn, was not realizing what was reality and what was not reality. And that part of it was the scariest part, because I didn't recognize that was a part of OCD. And if I had known that from the start, things would have definitely been different for me. The best part was that my mom was able to, I guess, somehow put two and two together by researching and just kind of Googling, or whatever we used back then.
AOL.
Just like what my daughter was kind of going through at that moment. And I'm guessing that because she had, tried to go to like therapy groups and all that, she learned that was part of OCD. And that was what helped me kind of ground me back to understanding that was part of my anxiety and part of OCD. That's kind of the journey where my OCD kind of started, more like jump started in that sense, where it was like very mild, kind of like your not cookie cutter. I hate saying it.
Stereotypical.
Yeah, stereotypical OCD, and how it took a whole jump from 0 to 100 in a time where I was just, I think it was my junior year of high school, and it was like after I took SATs, getting ready to choose what school I was going to, all of the, high anxiety stuff that you go through as a teenager, all of that. And that kind of rocked my world, I would say. I can go in more about it, but that's kind of a basic overview of where it started and where it kind of really jump started.
Yeah, it's incredible that your mom was able to, not Google, because AOL search that popped up like existential OCD, or that it was identified as OCD. Because I feel like back then, even, it was just OCD in and of itself was really not understood. And I feel like even today.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of support groups. And I think I have no idea because I was so, I had no idea what she was researching or Googling or whatever she was doing because I was so stuck in of the fear of just reality in general. So I was like, in a whole nother universe, no pun intended, like literally just mentally. And yeah, it's just it's crazy because I feel like not knowing that it was part of something that had already gone through scared me. And that's why I share my story, because I know how scary of a moment that was in my life. And for people that don't have the support that I had, that's why I try to be the support system for them, because I know that any moment anyone could have like a panic attack and not know what they're going through, but there's always someone out there in the world that has something similar to what you're going through. So
Yeah, and I think it is just really helpful. And it speaks to the fact that OCD morphs and changes. And so, we don't want to get hooked into or stuck on themes, but if we don't understand the different themes that can pop up, it can be really overwhelming. Because I think part of like that derealization or depersonalization that a lot of people with OCD have, it's the scariest part because it feels very different than other OCD themes. And I know my daughter struggles with that. She's almost 12. Well, next week she'll be 12. And it took me a while to even figure that out as a therapist. She would ask me like, Mom, what's your favorite color? She would like ask me these questions at bedtime. And I was like, at first I thought she was being cute, but then I realized like she wasn't sure if I was real or if I was a robot, or if this was her world or a different world. And she was, those were compulsions, like to check and verify that this is really her world. So it's similar. Yeah. And I think if people can understand that, and for her, even just me validating it and being like, there's a name for this, people go through this, and just that education piece of like, you're not going crazy is really grounding and helpful.
yeah, because even at the moment it was like as an adult now and understanding it, it's one thing to like be told like this is what you're going through. It's like, very hard to like understand it as a kid, and then to also understand it now and as an adult, it's like you get it better now as an adult and you understand it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're a kid, you're just making sense of your world in general anyway. And so it adds that confusion to it. So I appreciate you sharing your story because it does help for people to be like, it's not just a therapist saying, oh, there's a name for this, this happens. It's like, here's a person that went through it and I can resonate with that. So I appreciate that. And then your sister a few years later.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Emily again. I am turning 29 in almost a month. My story is very different. And I think just before I even talk about it, what interests me is like, I feel like almost we're like a perfect example of like so many different types of OCD and like different experiences. And so I'll just get to it. So essentially, I was a very anxious kid. I think I've just been anxious ever since I could remember, like, separation anxiety from my mom, crying, going to school, like refusing to go to school. And I don't really know, why that started. But basically throughout, throughout elementary school, and I'm pretty sure nursery school, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, nursery school, elementary school, same thing, separation anxiety, and then middle school.
But not knowing it was that, right?
Well, we knew it was anxiety. That's, what we didn't know what it really was, which was OCD. But, essentially in middle school, I would, it's like an age where people are, curious and confused in general. And I remember, looking back now, I remember sort of worrying about things that most kids wouldn't worry about. So I would think about like what would happen if I smoked a cigarette when I was older? Like what would happen if I like started stealing things? Like I'm thinking about this, like does that mean I'm going to grow up to become a thief? Or I had a lot of these thoughts about sexuality and like whether or not I was attracted to women or men. And so that obviously was not easy for me to talk to anyone.
And I remember, can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
I remember as being the older sister, I was going through my own OCD, but again, this part as she was, as we call it today, is like confessing and getting validation and getting reassurance seeking. We didn't know that that was part of OCD. And we've only learned that kind of recently, that that was part of.
Right. And I forgot to mention that part. So along with all of these thoughts of like, I'm going to smoke cigarettes, I'm, whatever, I would have to sort of confess these thoughts to my mom and sort of be like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, and I wouldn't come out and say, hey mom, I'm thinking this.
She would
like,
get emotionally,
yeah.
Like it would, all I remember as she was a kid was her crying in her room every night. There'd be something new that she'd have to like confess about or like struggle through. And that's all that's kind of like as I remember her as a kid.
And a lot of times I think parents don't realize that like moral OCD, scrupulosity OCD stuff, or sexual orientation OCD, like the stuff you're talking about, the biggest compulsion when they're kids is the confessing. And parents will think that they're getting it off their chest, and like, they'll have worry time and they'll just like, just tell me everything you're worried about. And it grows the OCD, it's the compulsion in disguise. I often tell parents, you're the metaphorical sink, because they get the hand washing. I'm like, they're washing their thoughts. And so it makes sense.
As a parent, of course, you were going to want to do everything you can to make them feel better, which
right.
is
listening to them or
saying like,
reassuring,
it's okay that you're experiencing this. And like, of course, that is like, what you should be doing as a parent, but it's also like when you are diagnosed with OCD, it's kind of like that thin line between giving in to the OCD or
challenging it.
Yeah. And that is the tricky part, because intuitively, you're right. I feel like as a parent, the intuitive response is to like support your child and listen to them, and they're having a struggle. And I think the hard part and the counterintuitive part is realizing that you're not talking to your child, you're talking to their OCD, and it's their OCD asking, especially when it gets into like moral questions or sexual identity, where parents want to be perhaps open-minded and they want you to explore and they want you to know they're okay with it, or they're glad that you're worrying about, stealing, or you're asking these moral questions without realizing, most parents don't realize that they're actually talking to the OCD, and they're really not providing that reassurance to their child, because the reassurance to the child would be, I'm sorry that your OCD is bothering you. I'm sorry that your OCD is making you think of this. Like that's the therapeutic response. But who thinks that way? unless they're educated, nobody thinks that way.
Right. And what I find interesting is that this is why I was saying it's like the perfect example of the fact that people don't know too much, like they don't know enough about OCD, is that at the time, like Lindsay is old enough to be like, not to, she was what, in high school?
Yeah.
So it's not like she was too young. And my mom, like knew of OCD and knew of this stuff and even knew of this existential portion of it by this time. And still we didn't know that that was OCD at the time. So still I was just an anxious kid. I was anxious about everything. I was anxious about the weirdest things, but it was never, maybe you have OCD because you're thinking about, like, the connection was never made. And I still think that that's relevant today, that connection is not made. So, as I got older, I worked through, middle school. I would, call my mom on the phone every day at lunch and just, all that stuff. And then in high school, it must have like, and maybe I blacked it out. I don't know, but I don't remember having many issues like this. I started to drink in high school, and like, anxious OCD Emily would be like, oh my God, I can't do this. I have to tell my mom everything. Like, so there was a point in high school where I was not that sort of, confession, needing to confess everything. But then I got to college, and I remember this very vividly. It was in a psychology class, and we were talking about like sexual orientation or sexual identity. And it all sort of came flooding back. Again, still I know I'm just anxious. Like I'm an anxious person. So that's going through my head. So I'm not thinking like, oh, this is like a normal thing that I'm going through. It's, oh my God, I forgot that I was confused at that time. Am I confused now? Like and
like
so
all those feelings of like unsure.
right,
And,
uncertainty. And then so I like broke down and like hid it for like most of college, like that I was struggling with this specific thing. And then, on the side, there were other things like, especially with drinking. Like, did I black out? Do I not remember doing something? Like asking my friends for reassurance. Like, I don't even know what happened last night. Like, can you tell me? Things like that. And you try to play it off like you're just being funny or like you just like, fishing for answers without being weird about it. And then I think those like two were pretty much the main fears I had, was that I was confused about my sexuality and that, someone could have hurt me while I was drunk, or I did something I shouldn't have done, or I cheated on my boyfriend, or, all these things. And then it wasn't until the end of college where I was like, I need help. Like I'm not well, like everything, it just was building up, and it was the sexual orientation stuff that prevented me from being more open about it and from going to a therapist. Because I think at
or
the
even
time,
talking to me about
right, I think at the time my mom was like, we can go to a therapist, and I was like, no, I can't go to a therapist, because then that would mean I would have to like say these things out loud. But I don't remember what it was or why I eventually made it to a therapist, and it was someone that Lindsay's had recommended. And the first day when we were, in the session, she was like, I was just telling her basic things. And she's like, you have OCD. And I was like, no, there's no way. Because my sister has it. Like we would have known. But it's just, the reality is it's a completely different kind of OCD. They look completely different. When you know about like the basics of, performing compulsions to cleanse yourself of your thoughts or to gain reassurance is like the hallmark of it, then you can sort of apply that to anything and you can recognize it more easily. So yeah, that it's just, and now it's still there, the OCD. I don't go to therapy anymore. My therapist told me I didn't need her anymore. So
Well, that's a good point.
yeah, that was about like 2 years ago, I think.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting, like now as we've taken on basically spreading awareness about it and talking about it and reliving these moments of like our childhood and what we're going through today, like we're always learning, like there's new things that we didn't realize are part of OCD, or like that we're constantly challenging each other. We live together too, so we see it all.
She'll be in the kitchen at like 11 o'clock and not say anything. I don't hear any movement. I'm like, Lindsay, what are you doing? She's like, nothing. I'm nothing. I'm like, stop looking at the oven. Walk away from the oven. It's not on, that sort of thing. So it's
I
definitely
love
helped.
that you support each other. I think that's just amazing. You're there, you live together.
It's been like such a beautiful and like, I don't know, just very eye-opening for this whole thing.
Just getting into like, what we're doing now with it and why we are advocating for it.
And it's kind of helped us keep ourselves like in reality check as well. Like,
keep our OCD in check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more open people are about their story, or the more they talk about their OCD, at first, I think OCD doesn't like that and it makes everything worse. You go to therapy and all of a sudden you feel worse because you're actually disclosing sexual orientation, OCD stuff, and, things that you've kept deep, dark, and, secretive. But I think over time, just advocating and spreading awareness is therapeutic because your OCD can't hide. And I know for myself with my own anxiety and my kids' anxiety and OCD, it like makes me a better person because I want to like emulate what I'm teaching. And so I'm much more aware, not perfect. I think we're all imperfect. We're all going to struggle, but just that awareness. And I think just talking to people, you learn more and more about it. And I'm glad you guys are sharing your story because you're bringing up a couple of really important points, I think, for parents to hear is parents will often get like tunnel vision. They'll be like, I only want to know about symmetry OCD, or I only want to know about moral OCD. Like they name them and they box them and they don't want to know anything outside of the box. And I'm always preaching to parents, you need to know all the themes, not to get into a box, but to be able to spot it and say, my child has this, but then my other child has this. I mean, like my son has restrictive eating and some moral OCD, and my daughter has got the depersonalization and the sexual orientation and the sensory motor and emetophobia. Like they all have different flavors. It's all the same thing. It's genetics, but would I be able to spot that if I didn't know the different flavors? Probably not.
OCD is the best, like not the best. OCD at its worst is like transforms into other things. Like it's a chameleon.
It is a chameleon.
And it's so dangerous because like I feel like not dangerous is the wrong word, but it's so like sneaky in the fact that it can literally just change and latch on to other things that you're going through in your life and you have no idea. So like being more aware of just like OCD general and like specifics of it is only for the best. So.
Yeah, because I think there's times where like I'll start worrying about something like health related. And, to me, it might seem like it's a real fear, but then you have to take a step back and realize
Which
like,
a real fear. It's just how you then take on the process.
React to it. But I'm just saying like sometimes we ourselves like have tunnel vision, like not as parents, as people that have OCD ourselves.
Yes.
Aren't necessarily like when you're in the moment of anxiety being like, okay, calm down, Emily, this is just OCD or this is just anxiety or.
Yeah, especially when it's wearing a new disguise that you're like, this isn't my theme. This isn't my issue. So this must be real. Or this is, yeah, totally get that.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class and I'm more interested to work on it.
I'm trying to do more exposures still and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it. So it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
You both got help, and then I love how you kind of, paid it forward. And when did you guys decide to create things or products to help other people with anxiety and OCD?
We were living at home during the pandemic in 2020. I was struggling. My boyfriend had just started law school in a different state. And, that was like really stressful. And the pandemic in general, just like with contamination OCD, was just not fun. And so I personally, like, I wanted something on my wrist to remind me of like what my therapist had taught me, because at the time I was still going to therapy. And because like in that moment when you're super anxious or when your OCD is super high, it's hard to like get a hold of it. And so like a lot of the times I would find myself like really, really anxious and frustrated with myself because I'm like, I go to therapy. Why is this so hard? Why can't I remember like exactly what my therapist would tell me? Like,
because in those moments of extreme anxiety and when you're really in it, like you're in quicksand, like nothing else matters. So it's really hard to like turn your head a little bit to like see that there is other things that could help you. So
right. So with a bracelet, and like because I have OCD, and I think I do have a little bit of like generalized anxiety. I was looking online for something like this. And even like a phrase that would relate to OCD or what I was going through, or like the specific tools that cognitive behavioral therapy taught me. And I couldn't find it online. I was looking up like, what are some like quick phrases that would help bring, OCD down a little bit, like in that moment. And I couldn't, I don't know if I was searching the wrong terms, but like I could not find anything. And so then I was like trying to think about like a phrase that might help me. And it was like, I just was like racking my brain. And then I remember one thing that Lindsay taught me before I started therapy was like the metaphor of your thoughts are passing clouds. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like, I'll just get that on a bracelet. I'll get those beaded bracelets with the letters and put it on. And then, as I'm telling Lindsay about this, bracelet that I want to get, like maybe you should get a bracelet, or, and then we're kind of like, what if we made these bracelets?
And then also at the same time, I really wanted to like write a book and like share my story about OCD and anxiety. And I wasn't working at the time during the pandemic. So it was like an aha moment where we were like, wait, we could actually do something and help people and share our story with others that are struggling, especially during this pandemic, because so many people, like, anxiety was just more talked about and it needed to be talked about even more. So that was kind of our realization that like we need to start this, like we need to create a campaign and like an awareness to what we struggle with and like what other people might be struggling with, and sharing our story and having people share their story, so then it kind of keeps feeding on.
And I also think it's just a little bit more of like making people aware of like what is currently out there as like self-help. And because, you can go on other websites and find bracelets engraved with inspirational phrases or reminders. But a lot of the times they're not in line with like what a therapist would essentially tell their patient to like think to themselves. Like you probably wouldn't tell a patient to, just think positive, or just, don't worry about it. Like, just, stick with it. Hakuna Matata. Like, I don't know, just like all these really overgeneralized phrases that aren't going to do anything for someone with anxiety or OCD. They're just like, and it's almost like good vibes only. Like in college, I had a sign above my head on my bed in huge letters saying good vibes only, thinking that was going to like, cure my anxiety. And it's silly. And while that is totally great for people who don't really need, an extra like therapeutic resource, having bracelets that have like realistic reminders or reminders based in like science would, I think we thought people would really benefit from it.
And I think also the part that always bothered me was like, we're not taught this in school. We're not taught how our mind works at all. Like we're taught how every other body part works.
Like we're taught about the functions of the brain, like what the brain does. We're not taught about like the amygdala, the hippocampus, like
yeah, but like not like
not like what a person goes through.
Right.
Not,
the emotional and like that aspect of it. So when you're a kid and you have these experiences or have these thoughts, and like how many people like could that help if we just like were
mandated.
It was mandated in school, and we were taught about all these like
I know, right?
Thoughts, like,
and such a basic like daily function, like social and emotional growth, like to be able to understand I don't know why it's missing.
I don't know either, and I'm surprised it's still missing today. So that's something I want to change. I have no idea. I'm not sure how, but that'll be on our next thing.
Well, I like it because we definitely need that. We have some people trying to move in that direction, but it seems like it's very like hit or miss on the school districts who's doing some social emotional stuff and like what does it look like. And to me, it should be like math, science, emotional health. Like, why is that hard? You know, I actually would use emotional health more than I would use math. I have my calculator. I don't need math. I mean, to all those mathematicians, maybe some people do, but I'm just saying like, but we all need emotional health. We all need to know how to be emotionally healthy and be understanding of ourselves and our mental health. So I agree. So so you started in the pandemic. It's called Presently. I'm glad you have the sign. I love the name. So it's like present and then LY just for those people, because they're not going to visually see you.
Yes, right. It's so, and then there's a cloud in the logo to represent the like first "my thoughts are passing clouds" phrase that we just sort of we didn't come up with it because it's like a therapeutic thing, but you know, it was the one that sparked the idea of having these phrases on your wrist.
I like that. And so they're bracelets, they're necklaces?
So we only have bracelets currently. They're all engraved. We have 6 phrases. And we sat down together and like thought of, you know, what are the different fears and what are the different thoughts that people have, and like what are the phrases that would help the most of those different things. So we have brave the uncomfortable, embrace uncertainty, I'm separate from my mind, I let go but I can't control, it's okay to feel how I feel, and my thoughts are passing clouds. So
I love those. Those are really powerful. Yeah.
And I think it helps people that have OCD and anxiety and just anyone, any human, because a lot of us aren't taught these like you said, basic emotional like health tools that are like, everyone should know it's okay to feel how you feel. Everyone should know that you need to embrace uncertainty, not just people with like clinical anxiety.
Right.
You know? So it's hard to try to like speak to every single person. But that is the goal. That would be the dream if everyone was like, oh yeah, I'm braving, you know, I feel I'm super anxious, I'm just gonna like sit with it and like, you know, let the wave pass.
And it's also something where like anxiety pops up out of the blue sometimes. I mean, most of the time it does. It comes in like, it hits you the hardest when you're not even like expecting it. And somebody who hasn't even been through therapy or even has had any sort of anxious thought and has an anxiety in the moment, it's like, if you just knew the basics of like how to get through
that moment,
it's
to know.
Well, and I think sometimes phrases are just like, they're powerful, like mantras, you know, that kind of ground you. And even if someone doesn't have the therapeutic background, they might wear a bracelet and then just it would have some meaning to them. You know, I know when I was going through hard things, I was very similar. I was looking for something that would ground me and I couldn't find it. And I wound up just ordering something on Etsy. I actually have this huge sign. It's not that big. It's a big square that says "You are in this moment." Because I just needed to be grounded. And it seems like such a common phrase, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So I had someone make it for me. But even with my rings, like I'm not a jewelry person, but like I have a fingerprint. My husband passed away. And so I have like a fingerprint of him. And then I have this other one, and it all has like meanings to me. And it's very grounding. I find myself touching it or taking it off when I'm feeling stressed. And I was looking for jewelry for my kids. And when my practice was open, I was looking for things for clients to give them, because in those moments, it sounds silly. It's really not something that's just like, oh, I'm going to wear this jewelry and people are going to be like, oh, that's cool. It's like you feel so overwhelmed. You need something that anchors you. Some people get a tattoo. Some of us don't want a tattoo. We just want something that we're wearing that we can physically feel and that we can look at. It's funny because when I was going through that rough time about 2 years ago, I found this artist who made like really cool like art that had like these inspirational, like it's kind of a feminist thing too. It was like, you got this, or like, it was like people who ride that you don't have to stop the storm. You just need to ride through it. There's all these expressions. Anyway, I bought all these postcards and I framed them and I put them everywhere. And my uncle was coming to visit, who's like 80. And he was like, you have all these things everywhere. He's like, they're in your bathroom, they're in your kitchen. He goes, like, there are all these weird inspirational things everywhere. I'm like, yeah, but like I use them everywhere. So I really resonate with your product. I love that it came out of your struggle, because I think the things that come out of true, authentic struggle are the most poignant things that can help other people.
And it's amazing, like how many people have, like, the reason we started this was just for the mere fact of just helping others that are like struggling and don't have a resource and need like help, or just like that talk to just say like, you're not alone in this. And like how much it has resonated with an array of different people that have different backgrounds, that have different diagnoses of like other mental health disorders, like how much it just has impacted them on a day-to-day basis is like, means the world to us.
Yeah, that ripple effect is amazing once you get some momentum.
Yeah.
So where can people check out your bracelets?
We have our website called presentlybracelets.com. We are on Instagram at presentlybracelets. And we have actually something that we probably don't promote enough. There's a quiz on our site that sort of has questions. Again, like we wrote this ourselves, just like thinking about like all the different things that people worry about in the world. At the end, it'll tell you which phrase might be best for your specific anxiety or your specific needs. And just so even if you don't even, want a bracelet, it's just like nice to kind of have that resource. And like we've been at, art shows, like Artists and Fleas is one of them. It's like a holiday market. And we had people kind of do the quiz then and there. And it's just so interesting how like a light bulb goes off when they take it, because then it's all kind of like, it's put together. It's like, you feel this way, like, here's a good way to think about it, or here's a good way to react to those thoughts.
And all of our phrases like come with an explanation of what it is about it.
All the bracelets.
Right.
Yeah.
All the
bracelets come with a card that has the phrase description on it.
It's almost like when you look up your like moon and your
astrology.
Yeah.
Not astrology. Yeah, that's the word. Okay.
It's kind of like that, but for anxiety.
Your anxiety, right.
Yeah, and I love that. I want to go take a quiz, because I think that's like, I think people would like that. It's like interesting to be like, what would be a phrase that would resonate with like my struggles or what my anxious thoughts are? And I did like the clinical aspect too of like, I did see on your website that there's a card that comes with and explains kind of like the therapeutic value of that phrase. And I love that, because I feel like unlike some other just mainstream feel good products or jewelry, there is some therapeutic value to this, and you really hone in on that and you help support that. And I think that is something that's missed in a lot of other just like feel good jewelry. There's some clinical expertise behind this that I think resonates with me.
Yeah. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback from psychologists and therapists that support what we're doing and have give us thumbs up that we're, sharing the right information. So that's always been something that's been important to us as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I will leave a link in the show notes, and I want to just thank you for sharing your story and coming on, because I know that so many people are going to find that really valuable.
Yeah, of course.
We're
happy to share. Thank you for giving us the platform.
It's so inspiring to hear about people's struggles and then seeing what they've done to turn those struggles into catapulting the energy to help other people. And I really feel like it's a really effective therapeutic approach or modality to take your pain and turn it into serving for other people. I just think there's just a lot that one helps you And two, giving back to others is also, it's a boomerang. It comes back, and teaching our kids how to do that. I love seeing people who are entrepreneurs who have taken their pain and have turned it into helping others. I know that for me, just doing this podcast and doing YouTube videos has really helped me. Even my courses have really helped me help myself, because helping other people feels good. And when it feels good, then it helps my mental health. And it also helps me become a better parent, because I know I'm talking about this all the time and I want to walk the walk and talk the talk. And so I'm much more aware and intentional with my parenting some of the time. I'm human, but because I want to be a good role model, I want to practice what I preach. And so giving to others actually is giving to ourselves. And it's a good tool that we don't talk about enough for our kids. So check out Emily and Lindsay's beautiful bracelets. They're gorgeous and they're very therapeutic. And you can take that quiz on their website and see what would be the best slogan for you or for your child or teen. Just go to presentlybracelets.com. It's presentlybracelets.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Also, if you were wanting to jump on and catch my live workshop on Zoom, we'll be talking all about how to find that core fear and why it's important. And so I'll give you all the skills for that. Just sign up at natashadaniels.com/workshop, and I'll see you on December 9th. Please don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.